Hello everybody! In February I was craving scrap. But then I had just got rid of a whole bunch of stuff, and as a result I had a bunch of space. I went on eBay and the classifieds to see if there was something that caught my eye, and I found something really cool that I think you're gonna enjoy. So what happened was, originally I bought this. I thought from the pictures that this was gonna be 22 kilograms of motherboards. Cool stuff, you know? But when I picked it up, it turned out to be 22 kilograms of industrial electronics that had nothing to do with computers. So deep into the night, frustrated at my encounter, I looked for other scrap to pick up. And I found this. This wasn't too far away, about 150 kilometers. And I made the guy an offer and he accepted and I was able to pick it up the next day. So the weekend was saved at least. I was in the RetroWeb Discord server again, doing an unboxing of this thing and showing off all the cool stuff I got. Now let's take a look at these motherboards, shall we? First of all, here's some highlights from the unboxing. The cultural significance of a certain motherboard is not to be underestimated. The K7S41GX by ASRock is somewhat of an inside joke at the RetroWeb, because pretty much every scrap load that I ever get, or anybody around me ever gets, has at least one of those boards in it.
Well,
Oh!
let's assume it works.
Number one.
Number one.
I think 1.7 because you are lucky.
Nice.
Standard. Oh
Okay.
no.
Trash pile. And oh no.
Oof.
Biostar. M7VKA.
Oof. That is. Is the BIOS chip removable?
Well, in any case, it's removed.
Oh, it doesn't have a BIOS chip.
What happened was probably they yanked the cooler off like this.
Probably.
And then instead of doing this, they just cut the cable. Oh, it's a DFO.
Ooh.
Another K7F long.
The count is at 2.
Well, no, somebody DIY'd this crap.
Zip tie.
Only the finest in German engineering. Oh, blät.
That's wrecked.
Oh, my lord.
Whoa.
Yeah, now I have the MSI variant of the Aladdin 5. As you could hear, a good time was had by all. The thing is, a lot of these boards had obvious signs of being scrap components, as in physical damage from things falling onto them, or ripped off components, or other problems that were fairly obvious to spot. A lot of these were OEM boards, which I just salvaged all the components off of before throwing them into the salvage yard, and some boards proved irreparable after a quick diagnosis already. Here I'll just show off the working ones and the ones that had repairable faults. First of all, here's this ASRock K7S41GX, number 1 of 2. This is a Socket A Athlon XP board with the SYS741GX chipset. Fairly late, and it was sold well into the 2010s as the last hurrah of Socket A in case you needed to keep a system with that thing going. This board worked out of the box without any problems. The next thing here is an MSI MS7104. This is a Socket 478 nugget for Pentium 4s and Celerons alike, with a VIA P4M800 chipset. Not exactly known for its speed, but at least it does support the 800 MHz frontside bus. And being a VIA chipset, this has native drivers for Windows 98. It also has SATA integrated into the South Bridge, which, believe it or not, was a new thing back then. It works perfectly fine as well. It has decent build quality and really good capacitors. You could definitely build a small Win9X gaming rig with this thing. Next up we have the Gigabyte GA6ZMA, which is a slot 1 motherboard with an Intel 440ZX chipset, which is basically a limited version of the BX. Well, the board works perfectly fine, except it misidentifies my Pentium 3 as having 338 MHz. I'm guessing this is an FSB setting, but I didn't bother checking that. So here's probably one of the main attractions of this whole set. The MSI MS6191 AMD Iron Gate Slot A motherboard. Very rare and very valuable. The board does post, but it's very, very unstable and I can't get it past the post screen. It also wouldn't detect the floppy drive. I suspect something might be wrong with the south bridge. This was something I couldn't diagnose on the spot and will have to go into its own repair video at some point. On a brighter note, the CPU seems to be fine. It's an Athlon Thunderbird with 800 MHz. I harbor feelings of resentment towards OEM boards, and this is no different. It's a Fujitsu Siemens D1214 socket 370 with an Intel 815E chipset. It supports copper mines and it works. Let's move on. From boredom to something super interesting, here's an AOpen AX3S Pro, which is a socket 370 motherboard with the Intel 815EP chipset. And not just the 815EP, it's the B-stepping, which means you can run Tualatin CPUs on this thing. What a great score! It also has a shiny golden heatsink, and to top it all off, it works without a hitch. Look at that BIOS! It's time for an absolute motherboard classic. This is an ASUS P55T2P4, a socket 7 motherboard with the Triton 2 chipset, alias Intel 430HX, and one of the most popular ones at the time. This is a fairly late revision 3.10, with the dual voltage regulators, which means it's capable of running MMX CPUs. After rudimentarily verifying the voltage regulator's operation, I just plopped in a CPU and went with it. This is another success. This board works perfectly fine. And you want to know what else is amazing? The Dallas chip still retains its settings. I'm not sure the RTC is running correctly on account of probably the battery being too low because it says it's 2012, but the settings are all intact and there's no CMOS checksum error. Now that's what I call longevity. Just for peace of mind, I decided to also test the split voltage regulators by plopping in an MMX CPU, and unsurprisingly, this rock of a board handles that perfectly. What a nice find. Another nice AOpen board. This is an MX6B EZ, a micro ATX slot 1 motherboard with the Intel 440BX chipset. This board also sports some nice ESS Solo 1 onboard audio and also has an ISO slot for a nice classic sound card, should you need one. A perfect platform for a DOS and Windows 98 all-rounder. The question is, does it work? Yes, it does. Awesome. Here we have a Biostar M7VKA socket A board with a VIA KT133. I also own the M7VKB, which is this but in full ATX. And the cool thing about that board is it has an ISO slot, which this one lacks. But it's definitely a nice board for Durans and Thunderbirds and such. This board works perfectly fine even though it has a giant scratch severing several traces on the back. Those traces belong to a sound chip that's not actually there. This one uses the integrated AC97 from the VIA chipset instead of the dedicated Creative Sound Blaster PCI solution. Off camera, for peace of mind, I did fix those traces though. Here's the last board for part 1. This is an MSI MS7037, also known as the 865GM3. This board features the 865G chipset, and supporting FSB speeds of up to 800 MHz, can run all the fastest Socket 478 CPUs you can find, even the latest Prescott P4s. It's still net burst, but what can you do? This board came with a broken cooler notch, a common fault on these machines, one that has in fact brought down German PC OEM Max Data with it, as they had supplied many official German institutions with machines that contained this board, a lot of them failing with this fault. I personally have rescued one such machine from the trash of a German government office, and I also heard quite a bit about this story during an internship there. Anyway, aside from that fault, it works perfectly fine. I just have to find a new bracket for it. That's it for part 1. In the next one, we're going to take a look at a whole bunch of boards that have faults. We're going to diagnose them, we're going to repair them, and we're going to have a great time together, okay? Thank you so much for your attention. See you next time. Bye bye.